And let this foreign agent, an enemy of the United States, do his job. So don't be suing me, okay, Elon?
Just when you think the mainstream media can't get worse, they somehow managed to hit a hypocritical new low. We're going to break down the mainstream media's latest really gross and deeply hypocritical attacks on Elon Musk and so much more. On today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across our politics, our media, and the internet, all from an independent perspective. Up first, like I mentioned, we've got to talk about an escalation in the media's war on Elon Musk, given his political turn and his role in the new Trump administration. Well, the liberal media that once adored him really doesn't anymore, to say the very least, especially the lovely ladies over at The View, that bastion of intelligence and true wisdom that's on ABC News. Host Joy Behar just went on an unhinged rant attacking Elon Musk that's actually xenophobic and hypocritical. Take a listen to this.
And Elon Musk kisses his butt and strokes his tiny ego or big ego, whatever it is. And he doesn't get to he can take a nap while the guy who was not born in this country, who was born under apartheid in South Africa, so has that mentality going on. He was pro-apartheid, as I understand it.
He's a naturalized citizen,
right?
Now.
He's a naturalized citizen.
Now he's a naturalized citizen.
Oh, really? How did he do that? Did he come over the border legally?
He had an H-1B visa, I believe.
He flew in.
Yeah, he allegedly overstayed that visa.
Yeah, but I think this is just perfectly wonderful for Trump. He can take a nap and let this foreign agent, an enemy of the United States, do his job.
Anybody else?
I don't like Elon. I wouldn't go as far as to necessarily call him an enemy of the United States yet. Let's give him a little bit of time.
Wow. Wow, there is a lot to unpack there, including multiple factual allegations that are simply untrue. But first and foremost, it is so hypocritical for her to suggest that Elon Musk, who came here as a legal immigrant and then became a United States citizen, is somehow an enemy of the United States just because he was born abroad. You're literally saying immigrants to this country can't be trusted and don't truly have America's best interests at heart, even if they become U.S. citizens. Babe, if a Republican ever said that, y'all would accuse them of bigotry, xenophobia, anti-immigrant, dog whistling, and discrimination, and you would have a point. But it is not somehow different because y'all are saying it about a right-wing coded immigrant now. Seriously, being born in another country does not make you an enemy of America. This is... we've talked a lot in the past about Trump derangement syndrome, but apparently Elon derangement syndrome is a new thing. There are plenty of legitimate criticisms to be made of Elon, and some of the stuff that he's doing with Doge is, I think you have to say, chaotic, and he has actually made some factual slip-ups and some mistakes along the way, which I guess is to be expected when you're dealing with a system as broken and bloated as the U.S. federal government. But he's not above criticism, but this kind of actual bigoted attack that's baseless on his character just because he's an immigrant is deeply hypocritical and vile and undermines legitimate critiques that can be made of the man. Joy Behar may also have just opened herself and her colleagues up to a lawsuit, and the producers must have been screaming in her ear because she came back after the commercial break singing a very different tune. I'll show you that after a quick message from today's sponsor. Eating healthy is a challenge for me, but I'm determined to feel better and take charge of my health in 2025. That's why I'm excited to share today's sponsor, Lumen. Lumen is an amazing tool that helped me feel better in my body, increase my energy levels, and maintain a healthy weight. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. Then, Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. How cool is that? So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Brad to get 20% off your Lumen. That is LUMEN.me/Brad me/Brad, B-R-A-D, for 20% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. And now, back to today's show. So you remember that claim that Joy just casually threw around that Elon was born in South Africa where they had apartheid and he had that mentality and he supported that? Yeah, that's not true. He was born there. They did have apartheid, but there's no record of Elon being supportive of it, and he left South Africa while he was still a high schooler. So this mainstream media journalist just casually spread stuff about him that is not true and is very damaging about his character on national television to millions of people. Now, she tried to go into damage control mode after the commercial break. Take a listen.
Getting some flack because I said that Musk was pro-apartheid. I don't really know for sure if he was. He grew up at that time when apartheid was in full bloom before the great Nelson Mandela fixed that. He was around at that time, but maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. He might have been a young guy, too.
Might have been.
So don't be suing me, okay, Elon? They're allowed to say any lie they want, but we have to be really strict. That's why this show's important.
Yeah.
So she just admitted that the extremely serious allegation she just threw at a figure of national prominence on live television, she actually had no idea if it was true or not. She just popped off. Girl, what? Do you not know what your job is? What you are supposed to be doing? Why are you saying these things? If you don't know whether they're true or not, why aren't you doing basic research? These people make millions sitting in a chair and gabbing on television a few days a week and can't do basic research before popping off. The audacity for me is wild. And then to act all high and mighty like, well, you know, we're good on this show. We correct ourselves after we say wildly insane and untrue things about people just off the cuff. You don't get a cookie for that. You don't get a sticker for like doing a pseudo clarification after commercial break after you lie about somebody casually. The whole thing is so wild, from the anti-immigrant bigotry that they're just throwing at Elon Musk because he's a bad guy and it's apparently fine to do bigotry against people with right-wing beliefs or associated with Republican politics. Then it's fine to be homophobic or anti-immigrant or racist or whatever. Then it's fine and it's actually cute and funny. That's very much the philosophy of these types. And it's not just them. It's not just media figures. Even members of the Democratic Party, elected representatives, are doing some very similar things. Take a listen to these comments from Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur.
Mr. Musk has just been here 22 years, and he's a citizen of 3 countries. I always ask myself the question, with the damage he's doing here, when push comes to shove, which country is he loyalty to? South Africa? Canada? Or the United States? And he's only been a citizen, I'll say again, 22 years.
Woke grandma here really thought she ate. Like, she really thought she just cooked, dropped a bar. Like, nobody's ever thought of that extremely basic anti-immigrant talking point that U.S. citizens born abroad aren't truly loyal or dual citizens aren't loyal. Y'all, do you not remember that you're supposed to be the party of non-discrimination and love and tolerance and pro-immigrant? And now as soon as an immigrant disagrees with you and is engaged from the opposite side of the aisle's politics, it's fine to just bring out the anti-immigration dog whistles. If y'all did not have double standards, you would not have any standards at all at this point, okay? And am I crazy, or is 22 years kind of a long time to be a U.S. citizen and live in America and build massive American businesses? Kind of makes you think actually after that much time somebody would care about America. She's acting like, oh, he just moved here last year and he became a citizen. Babe, 2+ decades is not recent. That's a long time to develop ties and roots and care about your country. And you can say a lot of things about Elon, but I truly do believe that he thinks what he's doing is in America's best interest. I might not agree with all of it, but I don't think he's a traitor or a foreign agent or a secretly working against the interests of the U.S. because his true loyalty is with South Africa or Canada. I think y'all are just hypocrites who will do the same things and say the exact same things that if Trump says them about a Democrat immigrant, y'all would cry racism instantly. And depending on the context, you might even have a point, but it's just hard to take y'all seriously when you are so willing to throw your standards out the window the second it comes to somebody who disagrees with you. What do you guys think? Are you even surprised to see massive media figures and Democratic politicians taking their attacks on Elon Musk in a blatantly bigoted, anti-immigrant direction. I wish I could say I was surprised, but at this point in 2025, my standards for media figures and politicians alike are on the floor. Like, you can't be disappointed in people when you already expect the absolute worst of them. That's pretty much where I'm at these days with politics and media, honestly, across the spectrum. But what do y'all think? Let me know in the comments. I do read the comments and I love hearing what you guys have to say. And do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Before our next topic, I want to do a quick update on yesterday's story where we talked about the crazy protesters who tried to shut down an event at Stanford, yelling, "Tax the rich, blah, blah, blah." Well, there has been an update that Stanford put out a statement clarifying that these protesters were actually outside campus agitators. They weren't Stanford students. So I believe I suggested in yesterday's show that they were Stanford students and that they should potentially be disciplined or expelled. I didn't know at the time. They hadn't released that information, but I wanted to update these were not students, according to Stanford. But, you know, if they're off-campus people, they should be banned from campus and probably face legal consequences for trespassing at the bare minimum. So still, many of the same themes apply, but wanted to make sure you knew the latest about that story. And now we got to check in on the media and the journalists because they're not coping well, which I guess doesn't tell you that much. It's kind of just a day that ends in Y. But Jeff Bezos, the, billionaire and owner of the Washington Post, the major national newspaper, just made a big announcement that he will be shifting the editorial direction of the opinion page. So not the whole newspaper, not their newsroom, not their reporters, not their business section, not their sports, just the op-ed and editorial page where people write their political opinions and make arguments. They'll be shifting the direction significantly. In a statement, Bezos wrote, "I shared this note with the Washington Post team this morning. I'm writing to let you know about a change coming to our opinion pages. We are going to be writing every day in support and defense of two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. We'll cover other topics too, of course, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. There was a time when a newspaper, especially one that was a local monopoly, might have seen it as a service to bring to the reader's doorstep every morning a broad-based opinion section that sought to cover all views. Today, the internet does that job." Bezos went on to add that the current opinion editor over at the Post was offered the opportunity to lead the paper in this new direction, but declined and so has left the company. "Jeff, my services are available. Hit me up." Joking aside, it's pretty clear what's happening here. All newspapers have kind of an editorial line, like a bent of their op-ed pages. He's changing it to be more in line with his classically liberal values of personal liberties and economic liberties, meaning free market capitalism, laissez-faire economics, not socialism, not confiscating and redistributing people's wealth, not crushing businesses with over-regulation. And it will now advocate for those ideas, just like the New York Times advocates for progressive ideas, like Vox advocates for progressive ideas, MSNBC, they all have, the Wall Street Journal advocates for traditional conservative ideas. All media outlets, or many media outlets, have an editorial spin. That's not new. He's just changing the one at the Washington Post, which until recently has been solidly to the left. And frankly, that hasn't worked out for them very well. They've been bleeding subscribers and losing web traffic in really astounding amounts. But you know what? The journalists and the media class are handling this news well. They know that they still have almost every other newspaper on their side, so they're being pretty calm about it. Just kidding. They're crashing out. Take a listen to this coverage and this meltdown that aired on CNN discussing this news.
Yeah, right now, Wolf, the Post is facing another round of subscriber cancellations as customers express their anger with Bezos' decision. The Post opinions editor David Shipley, well known in Washington, has quit over this shift in direction, which sounds a lot like the Wall Street Journal editorial page approach, more conservative or libertarian in nature. Of course, Bezos is free to do whatever he wants with the paper he owns, but the legendary former Post editor Marty Baron spoke out today saying he believes Bezos is prioritizing his own business interests at Amazon and Blue Origin ahead of the Post. Barron calls this a betrayal. Other Post veterans are also speaking out today, saying they believe Bezos is trying to appeal to President Trump and the Trump administration. After all, the administration can either help or hurt Bezos' businesses a lot based on the decisions the administration makes.
I now use the hashtags Broken Times and Broken Post. The headlines in both papers, I think, are constantly off. constantly trying to soft pedal what's going on. You're not going to like what I'm saying next, but we are in the middle of a totalitarian fascist coup in this country. And when we don't call it that, when we soft pedal it, when we don't have a real discussion about it. At least here, I could say those words. We can have that discussion, but you will not see those words in the New York Times or the Washington Post.
Jeff, if we were being honest, there should be a breaking news banner on CNN and MSNBC all day long. We are in dictatorship right now.
These people are taking crazy pills, but they're not the only ones. Many other journalists, including current Washington Post staff, are not taking the news well. Washington Post columnist Philip Bump just posted on Blue Sky, "What the actual F?" Meanwhile, Seth Abramson tweeted, "Bezos effectively shut down the Washington Post editorial page today. There's no reason to read anything that's just a dictate from a Trumpist billionaire. The Post editorial page is now as good, that is, as useless, as state-sponsored media. A disgrace the paper will not outlive." Meanwhile, Pod Save America host Dan Pfeiffer wrote, "By banning dissenting opinions from the Washington Post opinion page, Jeff Bezos is once again showing the danger of media ownership from billionaires in corporations seeking favor from the government and presidents they are supposed to cover without fear or favor." Very similar ideas were communicated online and on social media, like in this one TikTok video discussing the situation.
Jeff Bezos just announced that the Washington Post will only publish opinions in line with his business interests and beliefs, which he says are personal liberties and free markets. Now, yes, personal liberties and free markets sound fine and dandy, right? Freedom, liberty. That's why the people who use these sorts of terms use them. But don't let him fool you, okay? By free markets, he means a market he is free to manipulate. By personal liberties, he means the liberty for him to personally scam you or poison you. We're fucked, guys. We're fucked.
So you might be shocked to learn that I'm not buying the panic, and I find the meltdown here kind of ridiculous. I think this is in many ways, positive development. I support personal liberties and free markets, so if the Washington Post is going to use its significant reputation and clout and impact to promote those ideas, I think that's great. And despite all this nonsense about their banning dissenting opinions, all newspapers, or most newspapers' op-ed pages, have an editorial line. Some try to take an approach where they air all views, or at least in theory claim to, but many others don't. Many other publications have a specific point of view and perspective and don't publish things other than that. They're acting like that's some crazy concept, but that has always existed in media on the left, the right, and everywhere else. Like, that's a very common thing. And there's no shortage of places in media where people can publish or run or make anti-freedom, pro-big government, and pro-socialism, anti-liberty, anti-free speech arguments. Like, that's still just most of mainstream media. And I actually reject the idea, at least based on what Bezos said, taking it at face value, that this is a move in a Trumpist direction. Because Trump, frankly, if they truly were to hold to personal liberties and free markets, that would mean a fair amount of arguments challenging or disagreeing with Trump. Trump supports lots of things like tariffs, for example, that are not in line with free markets. And so you criticize, if you're going to be upholding free markets, you'd be criticizing that. On personal liberties, Trump has supported some restrictions on free speech, like supporting the banning of flag burning, even though the U.S. Supreme Court said it's free speech. Other things, like there's plenty of areas where still, even if they have this new editorial line, they may criticize or challenge Trump. You can look at Reason Magazine, for example, a libertarian news outlet that I read. Their whole slogan is free minds and free people. They're free market, personal liberties. That's their thing. They criticize Trump a lot. They also do pieces agreeing with him and supporting some things that he does, but they're not. That doesn't mean they're in line with Trump. Now, maybe you could argue that Jeff Bezos doesn't truly mean what he says, and he's saying free markets, but it will actually just be whatever Trump says. But I don't see any reason to believe that based on what he said. I mean, if that were the case, I'd criticize it, but I don't see any reason to not take him at face value with what he's saying. And I also think this idea that he's going to use the paper to promote his business interests is totally inconsistent with what he said. Progressives often don't realize this, but Free market policies allow for robust competition and often don't help established business interests. Corporate welfare is anti-free market and pro-big government. Policies like super high minimum wages help companies like Amazon that can afford them and price out their mom and pop competitors. There are many ways in which supporting free market capitalism is not in line purely with the business interests of a billionaire who might want corporate welfare or special tax breaks for their company or high regulations that price out their competitors, all sorts of things that we see where kind of progressive left-wing economics is actually supported in part by corporate America because they know it will shield them from competition and it will bankrupt small businesses and their competitors, but they've got the army of lobbyists and lawyers and accountants and can navigate the regulations and all of that. So if his policies that are promoted in the Washington Post are actually in line with free markets, then to suggest that it's just purely in line with his business interests is simply not true. And the people just treating those two things, free markets and his business interests, as if they're interchangeable, don't actually know what they're talking about. At the end of the day, I think it's a positive development. And again, if you want to have left-wing ideas and arguments, or it's not even left versus right, anti-freedom arguments, there's plenty of places to publish those. They're not going away. Just this one newspaper is going to have a different editorial bent. People need to stop melting down and feeling entitled to these platforms and total ideological domination of the media. You're not actually entitled to that in a country that has a wide array of opinions. And yes, Jeff, I am available if you are interested in my services. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And now we'll do a quick hits round on some crazy stories, starting with one federal worker whose TikTok meltdown is going viral. Remember, guys, the Doge department sent out an email asking federal employees to list 5 things they did in the last week. And this one woman is not taking it well, comparing her struggle to living in North Korea. Yeah, seriously, take a listen.
Today I responded to the email that we received as federal employees asking us to report 5 things that we accomplished last week. I'm not worried about my 5 things. I have plenty of things to report. I did plenty of work last week. But the feeling of just like absolute existential dread that I felt typing out a response to that email is something that I wish I could convey to everyone, because it felt like such a glimpse into the reality that they are trying to create. And it was terrifying. It felt like you will do what I say or else. And the feeling that I felt responding to that email was such a glimpse into a possible future here, a probable future here if we don't do something about it. It felt so scary and so heartbreaking. It felt much like I would imagine living in a place like what I always imagined North Korea to be like, where the energy is, yes, master, your wish is my command.
Girl, I fear you may have lost the plot. It is not dystopian for your bosses to want to know what you're up to. It is not authoritarian for it to be expected that you are able to list the things you've been doing as a productive, one would hope, employee being funded by taxpayer money. Now, is like I've talked about before, are they really going to be able to go through millions of responses and make sure this is all true? Do they really know enough about every single department? No, but like, they need to stop acting like they're being hate crimed by being asked to write a 5 bullet point email. It's ridiculous and comes across as so incredibly, astoundingly out of touch that I can't imagine how they think this is going to be a good look for them, or how detached from the realities of the everyday life of the American public they must be to actually think this way. Because this kind of basic thing in terms of accountability and transparency at work is something most people deal with. And it's not a doomsday scenario. It's just what like basic accountability in employment looks like. Anyway, this woman posted this rant thinking it would go viral with people supporting her, but that is not exactly how it's played out. Up next, we've got a actual massive W over in the UK. I criticize them a lot, but this one is a win. The BBC reports American loses UK appeal to become legally non-binary. An American who wanted to be formally recognized as non-binary in the UK has been told by the Court of Appeal their gender identity does not legally exist in this country. Based? Ryan Castellucci previously lost a high court challenge to have their gender recorded as non-binary on a gender recognition certificate a document which changes someone's legal sex after moving to the UK in 2019. They had obtained legal recognition as non-binary in California in 2021 and were issued an American passport in 2022, listing their sex as X. Y'all, I can't believe we allowed that silliness to ever become law here in America. Like, you know you've lost the plot when you're outwoking the UK. But honestly, good on the Brits on this one. I will give y'all credit. You might be kind of a dystopian country in terms of not having free speech, but at least you're not going along and pretending that any human being's sex is X. That's not a thing. Non-binary is like fetch. It's simply never going to happen. And the sooner that the alphabet activists realize and accept this and move on, and maybe just instead just advocate that it's okay for males or females to be gender nonconforming, to do things that are not stereotypically masculine or feminine, and that we should just have grace for people who are a male but very feminine and maybe want to wear a little bit of makeup or have nail polish or long hair. Great. Doesn't mean they're not male. They're still biologically male, and denying that reality is just absurd. It's gaslighting. It's not legitimate or serious. And the fact that states like California are still enabling that delulu is a real problem. And you know how bad it is because even the UK is like, no, we're not doing it. Even the UK. This one is an L for America. I'm sorry. We're not sending our best, I guess, to quote Trump. All right, up next, this Democratic governor just went full woke Mad Libs. Take a listen.
You know, you got to remember that the things that I'm speaking out about now, about, the threat to our democracy, this is not a message to win elections on. It's something people need to know. They need to know that that's happening. But, if you talk to 100 people, knock on 100 doors, and I've knocked on an awful lot of doors running for office, and you say to people, democracy is at risk, nobody knows what that looks like. They've never experienced it before. Yeah. And the reality is what people need to hear about is what the effects of that are. The prices at the grocery store are going up because democracy is being taken away. The impact on you in terms of your health care, 770,000 people in Illinois will lose health care as a result of what Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the Republican Congress are doing right now. It's a danger to your way of life. And that's what people need to understand. It's all about affordability. It's all about how you can, make it just a little bit easier for people every single day to live their lives. And they're taking that away from you. That is what it's like to have democracy taken away. So we need to bifurcate between educating people about democracy being taken away and talking to people about what the message ought to be about why they need to vote for Democrats.
This is a new one. That democracy is in danger because the other side won an election. And look, to be clear, I think Trump has done some anti-democratic things. I think when he threw his toddler tantrum over his loss that he refused to accept in 2020, I think that was an embarrassment and a disgrace. But this time he won fair and square, and now they get to run the federal government. That's not a threat to democracy. That is democracy in action. That said, to say that that has anything to do with grocery prices is strange. The math there is not mathing. If democracy is what affects grocery prices, then why did they go up so much under Joe Biden? Was he a threat to democracy too? Like, you're just straining credulity when you throw together random Democratic talking points and buzzwords like this in incoherent combinations as if you are filling out a Mad Libs. And I just love the absolutely delulu MSNBC host nodding along and making like the good point, yeah, sounds. Like, God forbid you push back on sheer and utter nonsense presented to you by a Democratic politician shilling for their side. That's what journalists are supposed to do. But yeah, so profound. You really ate with that, sir. Yeah, that's not journalism, babe. That is public relations. And you are in the whoever this anchor is, you can't see who it is. They're not on screen, but whoever it is, they're in the wrong line of work, to say the absolute minimum. It's funny because this Democrat just didn't even make the obvious argument. Trump did claim that he would instantly, upon taking office, be able to lower grocery prices. I said at the time, that's not a realistic promise. Even if you are able to do this, it will take time. And so he has taken office and grocery prices have not literally decreased in like a month. So if they wanted to critique him on this, they could, but they just can't help themselves from descending into absurdity. They just can't. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you again to today's sponsor, Lumen. Do make sure that you comment with your thoughts. I love hearing what you guys have to say. Make sure you're subscribed and do hit that like button if you haven't yet. And with that, we'll talk again real soon.